Welcome back to Life Unfiltered, the show where we, where we really get into the stuff that matters. And today we're tackling something that people don't always talk about openly. It's hoarding.
It's interesting, right? You think about hoarding and you often get those really dramatic like images from reality TV. But it's a lot more than just a messy house, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then how is it different? Like what makes it different from just being messy?
It's a good question. I think it's really about how severe it is, and how much it affects the person's life. When someone hoards the stuff, it takes over, it affects their well-being, it affects relationships and even their safety.
So it's not just about having a lot of stuff. It's about how that stuff like prevents them from living their life.
Exactly. And the thing is, it can really happen to anyone. It doesn't matter your age or background or even how much money you have. We see people from all walks of life struggling with hoarding.
And I imagine it's not just the person who hoards that it affects, right? Like their family and friends.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine living with someone who just can't let go of anything. Every surface is piled high. There's barely room to move. It's incredibly stressful and worrying for the people who care about them.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect. It
Mhm.
spreads out from the person to everyone around them.
Exactly. And the costs, they go beyond just, emotions. There are real dangers like, fire hazards,
Uh,
locked exits. You can trip and fall.
right, right.
And then there's the health risks, unsanitary conditions, mold, dust mites, you name it.
Wow, so this is really serious. Like it can affect every part of their life and the people around them.
You got it. And then there's the financial burden. I mean, think about it. Someone's constantly buying new things, it leads to debt, and then you add the cost of cleaning up, repairs, maybe even the property value going down. It's a huge strain.
Yeah. It's a vicious cycle, isn't it? The hoarding causes financial problems, but
Mhm.
then those problems make it harder to deal with the hoarding.
It can feel like a trap. And then of course there's the social cost. I mean, hoarding often comes with a lot of shame and embarrassment,
Right.
and that leads to isolation. People avoid inviting anyone over. They might withdraw from social events. It's really sad.
It is. It is sad
Yeah.
because it robs them of those connections.
Exactly. And it reminds us that hoarding, it's not just about stuff.
Yeah.
It's about people. It's about understanding the stories behind the clutter, the struggles, the fears. Why are they holding on so tightly?
Yeah, that makes sense. So why does this happen? Like people don't just wake up one day and to decide to start hoarding, right?
You're absolutely right. There's always a reason, often multiple reasons. One factor we see is our culture. We live in a society where we're constantly told to buy more, have more, like things will make you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that just in case thinking. Like, oh, I might need this someday, even if that day never comes.
Right. We all do it to some extent. But for someone who hoards that thinking, it goes to the extreme. And it's often connected to deeper issues, like emotionally.
So you're saying like hoarding might be a way to cope with something else going on in their life.
Exactly. It's often a symptom of underlying mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, sometimes even past trauma. Holding on to things can provide a sense of comfort, control, even security, especially in a world that feels, kind of overwhelming.
So it's not just about being lazy or messy. It's a deeper need that isn't being met.
Exactly. And that's why understanding the mental health connection is so crucial. Because if you just address the hoarding itself without dealing with those deeper issues, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger wound.
Right. Right. It's like the tip of the iceberg. Like the hoarding is what you see,
Yeah,
but there's so much more going on underneath.
that's a great analogy. And just like an iceberg, ignoring what's below the surface, it can be dangerous. Early intervention is key. Understanding the root causes, that's how you really help someone.
Okay, so we've talked about the impact, the reasons behind it, and how important it is to look at those deeper issues. But what can be done? Like what are the solutions?
Well, the good news is there's definitely hope. Hoarding is not a life sentence. With the right support, people can and do recover.
Okay, so where do we even begin? What are the best ways to help someone who hoards?
Well, one of the most important things is to seek professional help, and specifically therapy that focuses on hoarding behavior. There's something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which has been really effective in helping people understand and change those thought patterns and behaviors that contribute to hoarding.
Can you give us an example of how CBT might work, in this situation?
Sure. So imagine someone who has this strong belief that they need to keep absolutely everything, just in case,
Yeah.
right? A therapist using CBT might help them to challenge that belief. Like, what are the actual chances they'll need that item? And what are the consequences of keeping it versus letting it go?
So it's like helping them to see things differently, like
Yeah,
about their possessions.
exactly. And another key part of CBT is something called exposure therapy. This is where the person gradually confronts their fears related to getting rid of items.
So instead of trying to get rid of like everything all at once, which would be overwhelming, they might start with something small, like a single piece of paper.
Exactly. And with the support of the therapist, they can work their way up to letting go of more and more challenging items, building their confidence as they go.
It's like building a muscle. You start with a smaller weight and work your way up.
That's a great way to put it. And in addition to therapy, support groups can be incredibly valuable.
Right, because there's power in shared experience, right? Knowing that you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. Support groups provide a safe space where people can connect with others who truly understand what they're going through.
Yeah, they can share their stories, offer encouragement, celebrate each other's wins, even the small ones.
It's about building a community, a
Yeah.
community of support and understanding. And I've seen firsthand how these groups can help people let go of not just the clutter, but the shame and isolation that often comes with hoarding.
So we've got therapy to address the underlying issues and support groups to build that connection. But what about the practical side of things? Like, where do you even start
Hmm.
when you're literally facing a mountain of clutter?
I know it can be incredibly daunting, but remember, every journey starts with that first step, right? The
Wow.
key is to start small and be patient. Be
Uh,
patient with yourself.
Instead of trying to like tackle an entire room, you might start with a single drawer.
Exactly. Break it down into manageable chunks. And here's another helpful tip. Set a timer for like 15 or 20 minutes and just focus on decluttering that one area.
I like that. It makes it feel less overwhelming, less like an endless task.
Exactly. And you'll be surprised how much you can get done in just 20 minutes. Make it a habit, maybe a few times a week, and you'll gradually make progress without feeling overwhelmed.
It's like that saying, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
Haha, exactly. And as you go through each item, ask yourself these key questions. Do I need this? Do I use this? Does it bring me joy? If the answer is no, it's probably time to let it go.
It sounds simple, but I imagine it's harder to do than to say.
It can be, but with practice and the right support, it does get easier. And I love that idea of the timer because it gives you permission to stop, after that time, even if you haven't finished that whole area.
Right, right. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. There are professional organizers who specialize in hoarding. They can provide guidance and support throughout the process.
I imagine they can be a real lifeline, especially for
Love
people
that.
who feel lost and don't know where to begin. And having someone there to help keep you on track and to celebrate those small victories, that must be huge.
It makes all the difference. And, even if you don't have access to a professional organizer, there are still things you can do, like ask a friend or family member to help you sort through things just to be there for moral support.
Yeah, just having someone there to listen and to validate how you're feeling, that can be so helpful.
It really can, because decluttering can be emotional, especially when you're dealing with, sentimental items.
Which, let's be honest, that's often the case with hoarding. So
Mhm.
how do you deal with those items that are tied to memories, to
Titch.
emo
That's a great question, and one that we're going to dive into deeper in the next part of our deep dive. But for now, I'll leave you with this. Letting go of physical possessions doesn't mean letting go of the memories or the feelings that they represent.
It's about finding ways to honor those memories while still creating space in your life for what matters most.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be getting into after a quick break. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Life Unfiltered. Before the break, we were really getting into it, talking about solutions, for hoarding,
Yeah.
and you said something about those emotionally charged items, how to handle those.
Right, right. Because for a lot of people who hoard those sentimental things, they're not just stuff, They're like a part of them. They hold memories, connections, even their sense of self.
So how do you help someone let go when it feels like they're like losing a piece of themselves?
That's where therapy becomes, I guess, more of an art than a science. It's about combining practical stuff with real empathy. We never force anyone to get rid of anything they're not ready to. Instead, we try to understand the meaning behind those items.
So it's like you're a detective
Yeah.
trying to figure out the why behind the attachment.
Exactly. We might ask things like, what does this item represent to you? What memories, what feelings come up when you see it? And often just talking about it can loosen that emotional hold a bit.
And I guess that helps them see that they can keep the memory without needing the actual object.
Yeah, you're right. We might suggest taking a photo of the item, or writing a story about it. Maybe even creating a little memory box, just a small one. It's about shifting the focus from the physical thing to the meaning behind it.
That's a powerful shift, keeping the essence of the memory without all the clutter. But realistically, you can't photograph everything or put it all in a box.
Oh.
What about those tougher decisions?
Those are the times when you really need patience and compassion. We might use a technique called a cost-benefit analysis, helping them weigh the good feelings they get from keeping the item against the cost of the clutter, the strain on relationships, how it affects their living space.
So it's about helping them see the bigger picture, like how their hoarding affects not just them, but everyone around them.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this is a process, not a one-time thing. It takes time to build trust, to unravel those attachments, to learn new ways of coping.
Speaking of the process, we've talked about therapy, but earlier you mentioned support groups. Can you give an example of how a support group can help someone recover from hoarding?
Absolutely. There's this one story that comes to mind about a man named David. He'd been isolating himself for years because of his hoarding, ashamed of his house. But finally he reached out for help, and joining a support group was a real turning point for him.
What was it about the group that made such a difference?
It was that feeling of being understood without judgment. For the first time, David was with people who got it. They'd been through similar struggles. They didn't shy away from the messy reality of it all.
It's that shared experience, right? That sense of community. It can be so powerful.
Exactly. And in the group, David heard stories of other people who had overcome their hoarding, and it gave him hope. He learned practical tips, he celebrated his small victories with them. He even felt brave enough to invite one of the group members over to help him start decluttering.
It's amazing how connecting with others can give you the strength to do things you might never do on your own.
It's really inspiring to see. And for David, the group became like a lifeline. It gave him accountability, encouragement, and real friendships. He often said that letting go of the shame was just as freeing as letting go of the clutter.
David's story it's a reminder that we need to talk more openly about hoarding,
Mhm.
to break down the stigma. It's not a character flaw. It's a complex issue that needs understanding and support.
You're absolutely right. The more we talk about it, the more we create a space where people feel safe to seek help without feeling judged.
So we've talked about the therapy side, the community aspect, but I know our listeners are probably wondering about practical tips, things they can do in their own lives, even if they don't, struggle with hoarding. Because
Yeah.
who hasn't felt overwhelmed by clutter at some point?
You're right. We all have stuff, and it can get out of hand so easily. One of the best strategies I recommend, even for people who don't hoard, is what I call the 20-minute rule.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that?
It's really simple, but it works. Set a timer for 20 minutes and just focus on one specific area, a drawer, a shelf, your desk, whatever feels doable. The key is to really commit to those 20 minutes, no distractions.
I like that. It's a short, defined amount of time. Makes it seem less scary.
Exactly. And you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish in just 20 minutes. Make it a habit, a few times a week, and you'll slowly but surely start to conquer that clutter.
Like eating an elephant one bite at a time.
I love it. And here's another tip. As you go through each item, ask yourself, do I need this? Do I use this? Does it bring me joy? If you answer no, it's time to let it go.
Those questions are so simple,
Mhm.
but so powerful. They really make you think about why you're holding on to something.
And for those items you're not quite ready to part with, but you don't need every day, make a maybe box, put the stuff in, seal it up, write the date on it, and store it somewhere out of sight. If you haven't needed anything from it in 6 months or a year, you can probably donate it or get rid of it.
It's like giving yourself permission to let go. but without making a final decision right away.
Right, it takes the pressure off.
Mm.
And another tip, especially for people who tend to accumulate a lot of things, is to be mindful of what you're bringing into your home in the first place.
It's about changing your mindset, right? From more is better to less is more.
Exactly. Before you buy something, ask yourself, do I really need this? Where am I going to put it? Will it make my life better or just take up space?
Those are such important questions. Being a conscious consumer,
Mm.
making choices about what comes into your home.
Yeah, it's about creating a space that feels good, you
Mm.
know, supportive, nurturing, not chaotic and overwhelming. And along those lines, another helpful thing is to have a place for everything.
So everything has a home, a specific spot where it belongs. So you're not always searching or making piles.
Right. Get some good storage solutions, whatever works for you. Shelves, drawers, bins, baskets. Make it easy to put things away and to find them when you need them.
And don't be afraid to get creative with it, right? Think vertical, use the walls, repurpose things.
I love that. Get creative. Organizing shouldn't feel like a chore. It's about finding solutions that make your life better, more enjoyable.
And remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Start with one area, one room,
Hmm.
even just one drawer, and go from there.
It's a journey. Celebrate those small wins. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are lots of resources out there. Professional organizers, online groups, friends, family, people who care and want to help.
And most importantly, be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Getting to a clutter-free space,
Yeah.
it's an ongoing thing. It's about choices, habits, and embracing the process.
I love that. And on that note, let's move on to something really inspiring. When we come back, we'll hear some amazing stories of people who have really changed their lives by overcoming hoarding disorder.
Welcome back to Life Unfiltered. We've been talking a lot about hoarding disorder,
Mm.
the impact, the reasons behind it, the solutions, and now we're gonna to focus on something a bit different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to shift gears a bit. We've talked about the challenges, but now we want to talk about hope. Because even though hoarding can feel really overwhelming and lonely, there are so many stories of people who have broken free from it and really transformed their lives.
I love that we're ending on this note of possibility
Mhm.
because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it can be hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But hearing about others who've been there, who've come out the other side, that can be so powerful.
Absolutely. And one story that really shows this resilience is about a woman named Sarah. Sarah struggled with hoarding for years, and her home, it had gotten so cluttered that it was practically unlivable.
I can't even imagine how isolating that must have been, how overwhelming.
It was. She'd pulled away from her friends and family. She was ashamed of how her house looked, but she knew deep down that she needed help.
So what was it that finally made her reach out? Like what was the turning point?
It was actually a health scare. Sarah, she tripped and fell in her house amidst all the clutter and ended up in the hospital with a broken ankle. And while she was there, the nurse noticed some signs of hoarding and kind of gently encouraged her to get some support.
It's amazing how sometimes it takes something like that, a crisis, to make you realize you need to make a change.
It's true. And for Sarah, being in the hospital, it was a wake-up call. She realized that her hoarding wasn't just affecting her life, it was putting her health at risk.
So what did she do after she realized that?
Well, the hospital staff, they helped her connect with a therapist who specialized in hoarding disorder, and that was the first step on her road to recovery.
That first step, asking for help, that's going to be so hard.
It is. But Sarah, she was determined. She started going to therapy regularly, and she also joined a support group for people who hoard.
We talked about support groups earlier. How did the group help Sarah?
It was huge for her. For the first time, she was around people who understood, who didn't judge her. They accepted her for who she was.
It's like finding your people, the ones who get it, who see you.
Exactly. And in the group, Sarah learned, practical tips for decluttering. She celebrated her little victories with them, and they encouraged her, kept her accountable.
It's like connecting with others gives you that strength to do things you couldn't do alone.
It's really powerful to see. And for Sarah, the group, it became like a lifeline. It gave her that support, the encouragement, and real friendships. She often said that letting go of the shame, that was just as important as letting go of the clutter.
Sarah's story, it shows us that we need to be more open about hoarding. It's not about judging someone. It's about understanding them and supporting them.
I agree. The more we talk about it, the more we can create a space where people feel safe to ask for help without feeling ashamed.
So we've talked about therapy, we've talked about community, but how about, what can people do themselves? Even if they don't hoard, because I mean, we all have clutter sometimes.
You're so right. We all accumulate stuff, and it's easy for it to get out of control. One of the best things I recommend, even for people who don't hoard, is the 20-minute rule.
We talked about that before the break. Can you remind us how that works?
Yeah. It's super simple, but it's effective. You set a timer for 20 minutes and you just focus on one small area, like a drawer, a shelf, your desk, whatever you can handle.
Mhm.
No distractions, just 20 minutes of decluttering.
I like that it's such a short, defined time, less intimidating.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how much you can get done in just 20 minutes. Make it a regular thing, a couple of times a week and you'll chip away at that clutter.
It's like we said before, eating an elephant one bite at a time.
Exactly. And as you're going through things, remember those questions. Do I need this? Do I use this? Does it bring me joy? If it's a no, let it go.
Those questions they're so simple, but they really make you think.
They do. And for the things you're not sure about, some you're not ready to part with but you don't need right now, make a maybe box, put it all in there, seal it up, write the date on it, and put it away. If you haven't needed anything from it in 6 months, a year, then you can probably get rid of it.
It's like a safety net, right?
Hmm.
You're letting go, but not completely.
Exactly. It takes the pressure off. And another thing, especially for people who tend to buy a lot of things, is to be really mindful about what you're bringing into your house in the first place.
It's about changing that mindset of more is better
Yeah,
to something else.
you got it. Before you buy something, think about it. Do I really need this? Where am I going to put it? Will it add something to my life, or will it just be, another thing taking up space?
Those are good questions to ask yourself. Be more intentional about what you bring into your home.
It's about creating a space that feels, good, that supports you, that makes you feel good, not chaotic and overwhelming. And to help with that, it's good to have a designated spot for everything.
Right. So everything has its place. No more searching or making piles.
Exactly. Invest in some storage solutions, whatever works for your space. Shelves, drawers, bins, baskets. Make it easy to put things away and to find them when you need them.
And don't be afraid to get creative, right?
Yeah.
Use vertical space, use your walls, repurpose things.
I love that. Get creative. Organizing doesn't have to be a chore. It should be about finding what works for you and makes your life better.
And remember, you don't have to do everything at once. Start small, one area, one room, even just one drawer,
Yeah.
and build from there.
Exactly. It's a journey. Celebrate those small victories along the way, and don't be afraid to reach out for help if you need it. There are people who want to help, professional organizers, online groups, friends, family.
And most importantly, be kind to yourself. Creating a clutter-free space, it's a process. It's about making those choices, building those habits, and just embracing the journey.
Beautifully said. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into hoarding disorder. Remember, you're not alone. There's help out there, and there are people who care.
If you're struggling, please reach out. There's hope, and there's a path to recovery.
And if you know someone who's struggling, be patient with them, be kind, be understanding. Your support can make a world of difference.
Thank you for being part of the Life Unfiltered community.
Until next time, take care.
Take care.